Have you ever heard about Accasha, the Queen of Pain? The mysterious being who brought down the entire kingdom of Elza with nothing but a smile. In this video, Tales Mythology will take you deep into one of the most haunting legends of all time. From King Raladan's forbidden craving for ultimate power to the darkness spreading across kingdoms, where humans willingly surrendered everything for the promise of pain and ecstasy beyond imagination. Subscribe to Tales Mythology now, so you never miss the most fascinating myths, dark legends, and mysterious tales from ancient times. Join us as we uncover the truth. Was Accasha truly a demon, or just a reflection of humanity's deepest desires? Can a single desire undo a kingdom? Can one whisper not a scream, not a threat, but a quiet, velvet murmur topple the walls of a man's mind more efficiently than any army? The ancients thought so. Their myths spoke not just of heroes and monsters, but of temptations that walked like shadows beside greatness. They told of sirens, whose voices promised sailors more than pleasure, they promised understanding, the unbearable intimacy of being truly seen, even as the rocks awaited below. Today, we might laugh at such myths. We have science, satellites, therapy apps, and 24-hour news cycles. We've traded omens for algorithms, and yet people still vanish into cults. Entire corporations crumble because one man cannot resist ambition's pull. Artists destroy themselves chasing a muse who exists only in their fevered dreams. Temptation, it seems, has changed clothes, but not its nature. And so, the legend of Accasha, the Queen of Pain, doesn't begin in hellfire or apocalypse. It begins with a question. What if suffering wasn't punishment at all? What if agony could be holy? The story takes us to Elza, a shining kingdom with cathedrals of gold, towers scraping the sky, and priests whose prayers shook the air like chimes in the wind. To its people, Elza was the very heart of divine favor. That every kingdom casts a shadow, and in Elza, that shadow grew beneath the marble floors of its grandest cathedral. There, away from the hymns and incense, in chambers etched with forgotten sigils, a secret waited. It waited inside King Raladan Thor. Raladan was everything a holy king should be, wise, devout, draped in silk and sunlight. And yet, under the crown, behind the robes, there lived a hunger he couldn't name. Not for war, not for gold, not even for power. Raladan longed for rapture through pain, the lash of punishment. But the paradox the old mystic spoke of, that in suffering lies transcendence. And this is where history and myth start to blur. Because Raladan wasn't alone. History is full of figures who believed pain opened doors no prayer could unlock. St. Catherine of Siena fasted until her body failed, claiming the hunger brought her closer to God. The flagellants of medieval Europe whipped themselves through plague-stricken streets, convinced that each strike purified the soul. Even modern psychology admits that pain and euphoria live close together in the brain, the same circuits that scream in suffering can, under certain conditions, flood us with transcendence. Raladan likely knew none of this science, but he felt it the quiet, knowing thought that perhaps heaven waited not in hymns but in hurt. And so, one night, he did what kings should never do. He listened to the wrong whispers. Beneath the palace, in archives older than Elza itself, there were scrolls the priests had sealed away. Texts written before the current gods claimed the throne of heaven. They spoke of beings who weren't demons exactly, but doors. One passage, half-burned, read, "She comes not when called, but when wanted. And woe to the world that truly wants her." Raladan wanted her. He summoned the courts imprisoned demonologists, pale men with ink-stained fingers and eyes like sleepless moons, and offered them freedom, gold, whatever they desired. If they performed the rite of the velvet shadow, the priests would have screamed blasphemy. The people would have revolted. But kings rarely ask permission when their souls are hungry. Before we go further, understand this. Accasha, the Queen of Pain, was no succubus from cheap folklore. She wasn't some cackling villain wrapped in smoke and chains. Every age, every culture, gives her a different name. The sirens of Greece sang sailors into the sea. The upstress of India danced men into madness. Even the Bible whispers of Lilith, the first woman who refused submission and walked out of Eden itself. Accasha belongs to them all and to none of them. She doesn't conquer by force. She doesn't need to, because the door she walks through isn't in the world at all. It's in us. If this feels distant, kings, demons, marble towers, consider this. How many brilliant people today ruin themselves chasing something they can't name? How many influencers, CEOs, even ordinary lovers, keep pressing the bruise just to feel alive? Desire can build empires, but history shows it topples them faster. King Raladan thought he was summoning a servant. What he got was a sculptor, and the clay would be him. The night they summoned her was moonless. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Black salt traced forbidden geometry across the marble floor. Candles burned with green flames. The blood of a willing sacrifice marked each corner, because power, real power, never comes cheaply. Raladan stood at the center, crown abandoned, robe loose around his shoulders, a man about to meet either his god or his ruin. And when she came, it was like the air itself bent toward her. No thunder, no explosion of fire, just presence. A shadow shaped like a woman, half light, half night. Eyes like songs you can't stop humming even after you forget the words. Accasha. Raladan thought he had bound her with runes and commands, but as she smiled velvet, slow, inevitable, one truth slid into his mind like a blade made of honey. He hadn't summoned her at all. She had been waiting, and the moment he wanted her, truly wanted her, the door opened from his side. They say the first night after Accasha came to Elza, the palace slept uneasily. The guards at the gate swore the torches burned blue. The servants whispered of music that had no source, and the priests, devout men whose lives revolved around hymns and ritual, found themselves forgetting their prayers mid-sentence, as if some other rhythm now pulsed beneath the world's heartbeat. But the king was awake. Raladan Thor, sovereign of light, protector of faith, knelt in a circle of black salt, trembling like a man before his first kiss. Accasha had no chains, no claws. She didn't need them. When she spoke, it wasn't sound. It was sensation, a thought that bloomed fully formed in the mind, like a secret you always knew, but had forgotten until this moment. You wanted me, she whispered inside his skull, velvet and cold. So want me. In the days that followed, Raladan abandoned the throne room at dawn and slipped below the palace into the sanctum each night. The priests noticed first. Royal audiences were postponed. Edicts went unsigned. And yet the king wasn't sick. He wasn't mad. When he appeared in daylight, he seemed almost luminous. His voice grew softer. His gaze distant. He spoke little, as though the language of the court no longer belonged to him. The nobility whispered of curses. The priests muttered about trials from heaven. But those closest to him saw something stranger. The king was happy. History offers countless echoes of this pattern: leaders, thinkers, and artists consumed by a single, blinding devotion. Nikola Tesla once confessed his love for a white pigeon, claiming it brought him visions of divine light. The Roman Emperor Elagabalus replaced state rituals with personal cults, insisting only he understood the god's will until the empire rebelled. Even modern celebrities vanish into silent retreats, returning with wild eyes and stranger philosophies. Obsession often wears the mask of enlightenment right until it burns the world down. Accasha did not harm Raladan in ways the body could name. The wounds she left were not cuts or bruises. No, hers were the marks of transformation. Sleepless nights, trembling hands, whispered prayers to someone who was not God. She told him, "Pain is not cruelty. It is clarity. You do not suffer because you are weak. You suffer because you want to know." It was the oldest temptation in the world, to believe suffering held secret wisdom, if only you surrendered enough to find it. Weeks passed. The kingdom of Elza began to shift. Servants avoided the upper towers, swearing the walls breathed. The chapel bells rang off key, as though the metal itself dreamed strange dreams. Birds stopped landing on the palace roofs, and every evening the king climbed the spiral stairs to the highest tower barefoot, silent, eager as a lover. The council begged for audiences. The harvest rotted in the fields. Border villages sent pleas for soldiers against raiders, but Raladan only smiled vaguely, promising he would attend to such things soon. He never did. Psychologists studying cult leaders note this same pattern. Isolation. A leader withdraws from ordinary counsel, convinced only a select few or one voice truly understand. Revelation. They claim to see a higher truth, one that justifies neglecting practical duties. Devotion. Followers, drawn by charisma or fear, begin excusing failures as signs of mysterious wisdom. From Jim Jones in the jungles of Guyana to emperors of Rome building temples to themselves, history groans under this rhythm. A single obsession, mistaken for transcendence, dragging whole empires into the dark. Elza was no different. At last, the high priest of Ella dared speak. He entered the throne room, where Raladan sat, pale and smiling, eyes distant, as though he watched something just beyond the walls. "Your Majesty," the priest said carefully, "the people grow afraid. The fields wither. The council awaits your command." Raladan looked at him for a long time, and then, softly, he said, "Do you hear it?" The priest frowned. "Hear what, my king?" The silence. Raladan whispered, "It's beautiful." The priest left trembling. He later burned his own robes, muttering prayers no one recognized. Servants began murmuring her words in the markets. Pain is rapture misunderstood. Some carved her sigil into door frames. Others claimed dreams where she sang to them, promising not salvation but surrender. A new sect emerged, calling themselves the Veiled. They met in basements, fasting, carving symbols into their skin, convinced Accasha revealed the world's hidden truth. That pleasure and pain were never opposites. That to ache was to be alive. Throughout history, private visions often spark public faith. Joan of Arc claimed voices of angels guided her, toppling empires before burning at the stake. The Shakers in 18th century America began with one woman's ecstatic experiences, soon shaping entire communities. Even modern conspiracy cults thrive on whispers of hidden truths outsiders cannot understand. Accasha's legend grew this way, one dream at a time, until Elza itself began splitting between those who feared her and those who prayed to her. Months passed. Trade routes fell silent. The royal treasury emptied as officials simply stopped showing up. Farmers left fields to join wandering monks, singing Accasha's name at dusk. The Queen of Pain never issued orders. She didn't need to. The king's neglect, the priest's confusion, the people's hunger for meaning, it all spiraled without a single decree. Kingdoms fall, historians say, from pressure outside or rot within. Elza chose the second. One night, as thunder rolled over the mountains, the palace bells rang, though no hand touched them. The high priest gathered his courage, marched into the sanctum where Raladan knelt before his queen, and cried, "This thing you worship will destroy us all." Raladan turned, eyes glowing faintly in the candlelight, and smiled as though hearing a child interrupting prayer. "Destroy," he murmured. "No, she remakes." And behind him, Accasha finally looked at the priest and smiled. The priest fled. By morning, his hair had turned white. By now, Elza was a kingdom of whispers. Messengers travelled its roads with uneasy eyes, reluctant to speak the name Accasha aloud. Farmers worked silently, glancing toward the obsidian tower as though expecting it to breathe. Even the children played without laughter, as though something in the air pressed against their throats. The king appeared less and less. When he did, his voice had changed slower, softer, every sentence sounding like the end of a prayer. Some said he was cursed. Others said he was blessed. But all agreed on one thing. Elza was no longer ruled by Raladan. It was ruled by the silence behind his smile. Revolutions rarely begin with fury. They begin with hunger, with fear, with the growing sense that no one is steering the ship as the rocks creep closer. In Elza, harvests rotted in the fields. Border raids went unanswered. Nobles complained their petitions were ignored, while strange sects marched through the streets singing hymns no priest had taught them. Finally, Lord Hallin, eldest of the royal council, declared, "If the king will not free himself, we will free him." It sounded noble. It always does, at first. History groans with examples of uprisings that devoured their own victories. The French Revolution promised liberty, then birthed the Reign of Terror. The Russian Revolution toppled a Tsar, only to trade him for decades of iron rule. Even the Crusades often turned inward, slaughtering allies when no enemies remained. Revolutions dream of rescue, but sometimes what they rescue doesn't want saving. At dawn, the rebellion gathered, cloaked monks carrying relics from Elza's founding, spellbinders with tongues split in sacred oaths, soldiers whose armor bore both rust and prayer etchings. They marched without drums, without banners, without song, not rage, penance, as though they weren't storming a palace, but walking into a confession booth. The Tower of Invocations did not wait for them. When they breached the gates, the archway split open not like stone cracking, but like skin parting. Inside, corridors twisted like veins through living walls. Floors pulsed faintly, as though remembering footsteps long vanished. Doors breathed open with a sigh. Some rebels wept without knowing why, overcome by memories that weren't theirs, lullabies in forgotten languages, lovers' whispers in rooms that never existed. Accasha's presence hung thick as incense. At the tower's heart, they found him. King Raladan IV, once crowned in gold, now draped in rags, skin pale as wax, murmuring prayers to a queen who wasn't there. Behind him stood Accasha, watching like a sculptor admiring half-finished work. When the rebels rushed forward, she didn't move. Not when they dragged the king away, not when they raised holy relics, not when they chanted blessings so old the air itself seemed to flinch. She only smiled. Outside, the crowds cheered. The priests lifted Raladan onto the parapet, chanting hymns to drive out evil. But Raladan, eyes hollow yet burning with strange devotion, whispered 3 words before leaping to his death. "I am hers." The square fell silent. They expected his body to shatter like a dropped chalice. Instead, it folded inward, limbs curling like petals around a dark center. When the priests reached him, blood had already traced symbols across the marble symbols no scholar could read. Back in the tower, Accasha rose. The runes meant to bind her cracked like dry leaves. Chains crumbled into ash. Candles snuffed themselves out. She did not roar. She exhaled. And the tower sighed. Stone wept water. Windows fractured without wind. Some rebels dropped their swords, trembling, as though a hand had brushed the inside of their skulls. Accasha stepped forward, not bound queen, not summoned demon, but inevitability given shape. Throughout history, myths love villains who rage, conquer, devour. But sometimes, the most unsettling figures do nothing. Cults often crumble not with explosions, but with slow unravelings. Leaders, smiling as followers destroy themselves in devotion. Philosophers like Nietzsche spoke of ideas so dangerous, they didn't need armies to conquer. They simply rewrote the minds of those who heard them. Even modern revolutions sometimes end not in triumph, but in the haunting realization that the old order wasn't really defeated at all. Accasha embodied this. She didn't fight the rebellion. She let them win. Because she hadn't wanted the king, she had wanted the door he opened. As the rebels fled with Raladan's body, they realized too late. The tower wasn't crumbling. The queen wasn't chained. The silence following them wasn't retreat. They hadn't ended anything. They had set it free. That night, as Raladan's body called on marble and the priest sang trembling hymns, people swore they saw her walking through the streets. Windows cracked as she passed. Dogs whimpered but didn't bark. Lovers claimed dreams too vivid to speak aloud. And above the city, the Tower of Invocations pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. The Queen of Pain had not been defeated. She had been waiting. Morning came to Elza heavy with silence. Not the peaceful silence of a temple after prayer, but the kind that follows storms, when birds refuse to sing and even the wind seems afraid to stir. The people expected triumph. After all, the king had been rescued, the Queen of Pain confronted, the tower breached. But the streets felt unchanged. Worse, they felt emptier. The priests carried Raladan's body through the city in a solemn parade, banners of gold and white snapping weakly in the wind. They chanted the oldest hymns, words older than Elza itself, meant to cleanse both body and soul. But as the procession passed, People whispered, "Why does the air feel colder? Why do the bells sound wrong?" The priests noticed too. Their chants cracked halfway through, verses twisting into unfamiliar syllables, as though some other tongue had slithered beneath their voices. She didn't hide. Accasha strolled through Elza, as if she had always belonged to it. Children watched from windows, wide-eyed and silent. Lovers claimed dreams where she appeared at the edge of their beds, smiling softly, touching nothing, leaving only the echo of desire behind. Old men muttered prayers, then forgot the words mid-verse. She never commanded, never threatened, never even spoke, but people began locking their doors earlier each night. Psychologists call this the paradox of dread. People fear what they cannot predict, but they are also drawn to it. Serial killers in modern times receive fan letters in prison. Historic tyrants inspire cults long after their deaths. Even disasters attract spectators, as though destruction itself carries a strange magnetism. Accasha embodied this paradox. The more people feared her, the more they dreamt of her. It began slowly. A merchant closed his shop, claiming dreams told him to wait for the Velvet Queen. Farmers abandoned their fields, gathering at dusk to carve her sigil into the earth. A noblewoman sold her estate, donating everything to wandering monks who spoke only in riddles about sweet surrender. No sermons, no prophets, just a growing, nameless hunger spreading through the city like perfume on wind. Some of history's strangest religious movements began this way, with a single founder, but with whispers, visions, and rumors. The dancing plague of 1518, where hundreds danced themselves to death, claiming no one led them. The ghost dance movement among Native Americans, promising visions of ancestors and paradise with no single prophet controlling it. Modern viral challenges online spreading worldwide without clear origin, digital myths born from nothing but imitation. Accasha needed no throne. People built altars to her in their own minds. The royal council split violently. Some demanded armies to hunt her down. Others argued she wasn't a demon at all, but a test from the gods. A few quietly confessed to seeing her in dreams and waking weeping, though they couldn't say why. Lord Halin, leader of the rebellion, locked himself in his manor for 3 days. When servants finally broke in, they found him kneeling before a mirror, carving symbols into the glass with his fingernails. He never spoke again. Those who did speak of her claimed she taught a single truth. Suffering and pleasure are not opposites. They are two doors to the same room. Followers began fasting until hallucinations brought visions of her smile. Others whipped themselves in the streets, claiming pain brought them closer to the Velvet Hymn. But no one could agree on her purpose. Prophet, demon, goddess, the uncertainty only made her legend grow. Ancient history offers parallels in the mystery cults of Greece and Rome. Followers of Dionysus drank, danced, and wept in wild rituals, claiming ecstasy revealed divine truths. The Eleusinian mysteries promised secret knowledge about death itself to those who endured initiation rites. Even Christianity began as a persecuted sect whose rituals outsiders claimed were dark and strange before it grew into empire-wide faith. Accasha's presence birthed something similar, a religion of ache, dream, and surrender. Weeks passed. The palace gates rusted shut. Markets emptied as traders abandoned coins for visions. Bells rang at random hours, as though pulled by invisible hands. Travelers entering Elza left quickly, claiming the streets watched them. One merchant told of statues that wept blood when no one looked directly at them. Another swore the river changed direction for a full day, flowing backward toward the mountains before returning to normal as if nothing happened. Historians note how cities sometimes die slowly, not in flames, but in forgetting. The fall of Easter Island left giant statues staring over empty fields when resources ran out. The ancestral Pueblones abandoned entire cliffside cities for reasons still debated: drought, war, or something stranger. Even modern Detroit carries echoes of once great industry now silent. Neighborhoods reclaimed by weeds and wind. Elza joined their ranks, a place where life leaked away, not with screams, but with sighs. One night, A traveler camped outside the city walls reported seeing dozens of people walking the streets barefoot at midnight, eyes closed, moving in perfect silence toward the palace. They never returned. The next morning, new symbols appeared on the tower walls, symbols no one had carved. Accasha was no longer a visitor. She was becoming the city itself. Trade caravans carried more than spices and silver from Elza. They carried stories of statues that wept when no one watched, of bells that rang by themselves at midnight, of a queen draped in velvet shadows, whose footsteps cracked stone without shattering it, whose smile lingered in dreams long after the dream awoke. Soon, villages far from Elza spoke her name in candlelit kitchens, whispering it like a prayer and a curse at once. Accasha. She no longer belonged to one city. She belonged to rumor, and rumor spreads faster than armies. Historians note how certain ideas leap across borders with terrifying speed. The Black Death killed millions in medieval Europe, but the fear of it reached villages weeks before the rats did. The Reformation swept through Europe, not just by preaching, but by pamphlets, words on paper, toppling centuries-old faith in decades. Even today, conspiracy theories or internet challenges spread globally in hours, reshaping behavior without central leadership. Accasha traveled this way not in flesh, but in fascination. South of Elza lay the kingdom of Vero, known for its rigid laws and iron-fisted king. At first, they mocked the stories, a queen of shadows, dreams and bells, children's tales. But then, the king's own guards began abandoning posts to wander into the hills at night. Whole villages stopped paying taxes, claiming they awaited the velvet revelation. A monastery reported monks refusing to speak, simply drawing intricate symbols on the walls until their fingernails tore. Within months, Vero's council met in silence, waiting for orders the king no longer gave. No war, no invasion, just forgetting. This is the strangest part. Accasha never raises armies. She never demands tribute. She never sits on thrones. And yet, rulers bow. Priests fall silent. Lovers wake at midnight, breathless, claiming they felt her lips at the edge of a dream. Power depends on obedience. Accasha only needs want. Some of history's most unsettling figures commanded not through borders or soldiers, but through belief. Rasputin, the mad monk of Russia, held no title yet bent a royal court to his will through charisma and rumor. The 20th century cult leader, Jim Jones, persuaded hundreds to follow him into the jungles and eventually into death without armies or crowns. Even modern celebrities spark movements, diets, or ideologies through personality alone, reshaping culture without formal power. Accasha stands among them, except she isn't mortal. Soon, travelers began walking toward Elza from distant lands. Peasants abandoning fields, nobles leaving courts mid-feast, soldiers laying down swords mid-battle to join silent marches toward the ruined tower. They came barefoot, empty-handed, eyes closed, guided by dreams they couldn't describe. Villages reported lines of pilgrims stretching miles across the countryside, moving without leaders, banners, or speech, as though the world itself leaned toward her. History echoes this phenomenon. The Children's Crusade of 1212 saw thousands of children march across Europe, convinced God himself called them, though no pope commanded it. The Millerite movement in 19th century America sold farms, businesses, and homes believing the world would end on a specific date, a date that passed quietly while followers wept in empty fields. Even modern doomsday cults see members abandon families and careers for visions no outsider can understand. Accasha inspired this same fever, except she promised no apocalypse. She promised nothing at all. As decades passed, entire governments unraveled. Councils met in perfect silence, staring at walls as if waiting for instructions from something unseen. Armies deserted en masse, leaving fortresses empty, banners rotting in rain. Priests stopped preaching, simply standing in pulpits weeping softly as congregations joined them. No decree banned religion, no army toppled governments. They simply stopped caring. In cities that still functioned, graffiti appeared on walls, carved into fountains, scrawled across palace gates. Yes, just that word, over and over. No one admitted writing it, but it appeared in every language. Philosophers claimed it was the only prayer Accasha required. Yes to the ache, yes to the dream, yes to surrender. History shows how single words spark entire movements. Liberty fueled revolutions across continents. Equality toppled empires and rewrote laws. Even modern slogans like "Just Do It" or "Make America Great Again" shape identities. Selling shoes or winning elections with shocking power. Accasha's word wasn't political. It wasn't commercial. It was existential. Yes, Far East, the empire of Druze prided itself on logic, science, and skepticism. When rumors of Accasha reached them, scholars laughed. A queen of shadows toppling kingdoms with dreams, superstition for peasants. But then professors began vanishing mid-lecture. Students stopped writing essays, spending nights drawing symbols on dormitory walls. Engineers left bridges half-built, claiming she will finish them. Within a decade, Druze produced no books, no inventions, no laws. Its libraries stood open to wind and rain. Even modern history knows this rhythm. The Maya civilization abandoned cities of astronomical precision without clear reason. The Roman Empire decayed, not from foreign invasions alone, but from centuries of internal neglect, corruption, and loss of civic identity. Today, some argue modern societies drown in distraction and apathy long before any external enemy strikes. Accasha weaponized this forgetting, not with malice, but with inevitability. Travelers spoke of entire kingdoms sitting in public squares 4 days, staring at nothing, waiting for something. Others reported cities where people laughed and wept at once, hugging strangers before wandering into forests barefoot, never returning. No wars, no massacres, just silence spreading like ink in water. And always the rumor. She was here last night. She walked through the streets. She smiled. By now, decades had passed since the fall of Elza. Entire kingdoms had dissolved not in war or famine, but in forgetting. Villages stood empty. Libraries collected dust no one wiped away. Temples hosted priests who no longer prayed. Yet here and there, a few people still remembered. Old soldiers who recalled marching under banners before the armies melted away. Former scholars who once debated philosophy before universities fell silent. Children who watched parents walk into forests barefoot and never return. Memory itself became rebellion. In mountain caves, in ruined fortresses, survivors began gathering. They met in silence at first, afraid even speech might summon her. But slowly, words returned. The world wasn't always like this. We used to build things. We used to care. They called themselves the Bound, vowing to resist the queen who unbound everything. History shows how memory fuels defiance. After the Mongol invasions, surviving scholars in the Middle East copied ancient texts by hand, refusing to let knowledge die. In Soviet gulags, prisoners secretly taught each other banned poetry, preserving culture through whispers. Even enslaved communities worldwide preserve songs, languages, and faiths despite systematic erasure. When power erases the present, memory keeps rebellion alive. The Bound rejected Accasha's velvet gospel. They claimed, pain is not rapture, desire is not destiny. We choose what we worship. They refused dreams, fasting until hallucinations ceased. They bound their own eyes during prayer so visions couldn't reach them. Some even burned their own skin with salt to drown out her whispers, choosing real pain over the seductive ache she offered. This rebellion fought no armies. Accasha had none. Instead, they fought dreams. They drank bitter teas to block sleep. They carved sacred symbols into walls to ward off visions. They trained themselves to ignore music, incense, even beauty itself, fearing every pleasure might carry her fingerprints. It was less a war than a battle of will's memory versus longing. Modern psychology recognizes this kind of battle. Survivors of cults describe resisting thought reform techniques by clinging to old songs or childhood prayers. Propaganda victims in wartime smuggled photographs or letters to remind themselves of truths beyond enemy lies. Even today, therapists help people leaving controlling groups rebuild identities erased by manipulation. The Bound became history's therapists, reminding each other The world had once been solid, ordinary, theirs. Accasha never attacked them directly, but dreams grew stranger wherever the bound met. One man awoke speaking languages no one understood. A woman claimed the walls of her hut wept at night. Entire villages near bound camps reported hearing lullabies with no source. As though Accasha leaned closer, curious, the bound issued a decree. No music, no incense, no prayer above a whisper. They believed Accasha fed on beauty, desire, and longing, so they tried to starve her. Cities under bound control banned festivals, marriages, even singing. Children grew up never hearing lullabies, taught to fear any dream with velvet shadows in it. History knows similar campaigns. The Byzantine iconoclasts destroyed religious art, fearing images invited divine wrath. The Puritans banned Christmas in 17th century England, calling it sinful excess. Some modern regimes censor music, art, or literature, fearing beauty sparks rebellion or chaos. The bound weren't tyrants exactly, but they became Puritans of memory, fearing desire itself. At last, the bound marched on Elza's ruins. Warriors carried shields painted black to reflect no light. Priests banned their mouths, so no accidental prayer escaped. Children carried salt to scatter across roads, a barrier against her whispers. The Tower of Invocations waited. Its walls no longer looked like stone. They pulsed faintly, as though alive, veins of red light running beneath the surface. They found no throne, no altar, only corridors lined with carvings, not words, but music made visible. Grooves in stone, thrumming melodies no instrument could play. Some rebels wept upon seeing them, hearing songs inside their own minds. Others tore out their eyes to silence it. At the tower's heart, Accasha waited, not chained, not angry, just watching. A rebel leader shouted, "You've stolen our kingdoms, our faiths, our lives." Accasha tilted her head, almost curious, then whispered inside every skull at once, "I gave you what you asked for. You wanted more. I only showed you the door." The bound attacked torches, relics, salt, swords. The flames bent away from her. The relics cracked in priests' hands. Salt turned to Ashmedare. She didn't move. History remembers uprisings crushed by overwhelming force, but some meet only indifference. The Tiananmen Square protest ended with silence after the cameras left. The Prague Spring reformers faced Soviet tanks that rolled in without speeches, ending hope with bureaucratic efficiency. Even modern whistleblowers sometimes shout into voids of public apathy, truth ignored as if it never mattered. The bound expected wrath. Silence was worse. As rebels fled the tower, they realized Accasha hadn't followed. She hadn't needed to. Already, some soldiers knelt mid-retreat, trembling, eyes closed, whispering, "Maybe she's right. Maybe we wanted this." The rebellion fractured before it began. Because how do you fight something living in the very part of you that aches? Generations passed after the rebellion of the bound. Elza itself became legend, a city swallowed by silence, its tower pulsing faintly on the horizon like a half-forgotten dream. But bloodlines survive where cities fall. Raladan's descendants ruled scraps of territory far from the ruins, petty kings clinging to titles, like children hugging broken toys. They avoided the old capital. They banned the queen's name from law and prayer. They built castles of stone and iron, swearing never to repeat his mistakes. And yet temptation skips, like a stone across centuries. One heir, a prince named Kellen, grew up hearing fragments of forbidden stories, that his ancestor knelt before a queen of shadows, that she offered knowledge older than gods, that the fall of Elza wasn't conquest but transcendence. He laughed at the old warnings. Superstition, he called it. Kellen studied philosophy, alchemy, even the new mechanical sciences blooming in distant lands, and he became obsessed with one question. If she could topple kingdoms without swords or fire, what else might she reveal? History knows heirs who repeat the very mistakes their ancestors bled to prevent. The Crusader kingdoms in the Holy Land fell repeatedly because each new ruler dreamed of glory despite centuries of failure. Chinese emperors rebuilt forbidden palaces on cursed lands, convinced they would tame the spirits previous dynasties feared. Even modern leaders repeat wars history proved unwinnable, certain their strategy will succeed where others fell. Kellen joined this long, arrogant line. Against all counsel, Kellen marched to the ruins of Elza with scholars, mercenaries, and priests carrying relics meant to protect them. They found streets cracked but intact, as though time itself avoided the city. Statues of kings with faces eroded smooth, names lost to wind. The Tower of Invocations still standing, faintly pulsing, walls veined with red light. No birds circled it, no plants grew near it, as though the earth itself held its breath. Kellen entered at dusk. The corridors whispered with windless sighs. Symbols glowed faintly under his torchlight, shapes like music carved into stone. At the tower's heart, she waited. Accasha, the same as centuries before, neither older nor younger. Beauty coiled around terror, like silk hiding steel. She smiled. Kellen fell to one knee before he realized he was moving. He demanded answers. What are you? A demon? A goddess? A curse? Her voice filled his skull, warm water. I am what opens when you knock. He asked why kingdoms fell, why people followed her into dreams, why even rebellions failed. She only whispered, I never asked for followers. I never wanted thrones. I gave you what you sought. More. Philosophers warn against this ancient human itch. The Greek myth of Icarus' wings melting because flying wasn't enough. He had to fly higher. The legend of Faust, trading his soul for infinite knowledge, yet never satisfied. Modern obsessions with immortality, AI, or colonizing planets, each chasing limits farther, faster, forever. Accasha wasn't a villain. She was inevitability, the shape of human hunger given form. The chronicles say Kellen never returned from Elza. His soldiers fled weeks later, claiming the tower breathed at night. Some reported hearing their prince singing inside its walls, a lullaby that made even battle-hardened mercenaries weep. The royal bloodline ended without heirs. Raladan's dynasty, once ruling a continent, vanished into the same silence that swallowed its founder. Across kingdoms, philosophers debated Accasha's meaning. Priests called her a demon of temptation. Poets hailed her as muse of forbidden beauty. Scholars labeled her a metaphor for longing itself. But a few suggested a stranger idea. She is not good or evil. She is the part of us that keeps reaching, even when reaching destroys us. Because without longing, there are no cathedrals, no poems, no revolutions. But with too much longing, kingdoms burn themselves down chasing whispers in the dark. History offers endless warnings. Ozymandias, king of kings, whose empire crumbled into desert around his lone statue. Alexander the Great, weeping because no worlds remained to conquer, dying at 30 to anyway. Modern titans building corporations, empires, or weapons so powerful they fear losing control themselves. Desire builds, desire destroys. Accasha simply waits. Centuries later, wandering monks reached Elza's ruins. They found no bodies, no relics, no trace of Kellen's army, only symbols carved into the tower's walls. Yes, over and over, in every language. One monk wrote before vanishing himself. Perhaps she is not the queen of pain at all. Perhaps she is the queen of want, and we kneel not because she demands it, but because we do. Because sometimes the door to ruin wears our own fingerprints, and sometimes the thing waiting inside never pushed. Centuries passed, kingdoms fell, new empires rose, then fractured into dust. Languages changed, religions rewrote themselves, machines replaced horses, towers of glass reached where cathedrals once prayed. But still, in the ruins of Elza, the Tower of Invocations stood. Its walls no longer pulsed, its doors no longer breathed. Travelers claimed it was empty now, just stone, wind, and moss. And yet, artists painted the queen's shadow without knowing why. Poets dreamt lines in languages they didn't speak. Soldiers before battle swore they heard a woman humming through the gun smoke. Accasha had stopped appearing because she no longer needed to. Some legends vanish with the people who told them. Others survive in fragments, names muttered in remote villages or scribbled in margins of old books. But a few refuse to die. The flood myth appears in Mesopotamia, the Bible, India, even Native American traditions, as if every culture remembered the same drowning. Trickster gods like Loki, Coyote, or Anansi shift forms, but never vanish, retold century after century in new masks. Even modern UFO stories echo older tales of angels, demons, and fairies visiting night skies. Accasha joined these immortals, changing shape, name, and era, but never leaving entirely, as trains carved across continents and telegraphs carried messages faster than light. New kinds of myths bloomed, factories replacing forests, cities swallowing horizons, wars killing millions with machines kings of old couldn't imagine. People claimed progress ended superstition, but still, factory workers in Europe reported seeing a woman in black velvet walking through empty warehouses at night. Soldiers in World War I trenches whispered about a shadowy figure who sang softly during bombardments, leaving men weeping before battles. A famous pianist in 1923 vanished for 3 days, later saying only, "I played for her. You wouldn't understand." Accasha didn't fade in the age of reason, she adapted. Skeptics dismiss such tales, yet even the 20th century swarms with strange patterns. Marian apparitions in Europe drew thousands, even as governments tried to silence them. UFO cults in the 1950s claimed cosmic visitors demanded spiritual surrender, not technology. Modern celebrities speak of muses or dark inspiration, as though creativity itself bites when you feed it too much. Accasha belonged to no religion, yet resembled them all. When the internet came, the first forums carried rumors. Has anyone else dreamt of the woman in velvet? I woke humming a song I've never heard before she was there. Artists across continents painted the same face without meeting. Musicians uploaded melodies they swore came from dreams, eerily similar despite oceans between them. TikTok videos showed teenagers carving YES into school desks, laughing like it was a joke, until entire classrooms fell silent mid-lesson, staring at nothing. Accasha no longer needed thrones or towers. She had Wi-Fi. Anthropologists now study memes the way scholars once studied folklore. Legends like Slender Man spread online, inspiring real-world fear, art, even violence. Creepypasta horror stories jump from forum to forum, growing with each retelling. Like digital campfire tales, viral challenges convince millions to imitate strangers for no reason beyond belonging to something unseen. Accasha thrived in this new ecology, no longer a queen in marble halls, now a whisper between algorithms. Philosophers debate whether she was ever real. Psychologists call her mass hysteria, shaped like a woman. Theologians label her humanity's recurring heresy, the temptation to worship longing itself. Poets call her love, lust, art, war, ambition, every flame burning higher than the hands that lit it. But maybe the truth is simpler. Accasha is what happens when desire escapes its cage, when pain stops being warning and becomes invitation, when ambition builds towers higher than prayers can reach, when the human heart keeps asking for more until the word enough means nothing. Even today, corporations chase profit until oceans choke with plastic. Politicians chase power until nations burn behind them. Artists chase perfection until they vanish into overdose, madness, or silence. Every age kneels somewhere, before gold, before gods, before dreams of velvet shadows walking just out of reach. Accasha didn't die because we keep summoning her. Urban legends now call her the lady between dreams. Truckers on American highways see her at dusk, walking barefoot along empty interstates. Brazilian fishermen tell of a woman singing beneath bridges. Nets always full the next day, though none thank her aloud. A Tokyo businessman swears he met her in a karaoke bar, singing the same song he heard in childhood dreams. She wears suits now, or leather jackets, or school uniforms, but always the same smile, half mercy, half hunger. One writer claims he saw her in a New York subway station at 3 a.m. She sat beside him on a bench, humming softly. He asked what she wanted. She only whispered, "I never wanted anything. I only wait." Humans always come knocking. When the train roared past, she was gone, but his notebook afterward held one word on every page. Yes, so what do we learn from the Queen of Pain, the Queen of Want? That desire builds kingdoms and burns them down. That pleasure and suffering walk through the same door. That surrender wears many masks: love, art, faith, ambition. And maybe the point was never to destroy her. The point was to learn when to stop kneeling,